Target acquired. Confirmed, unidentified aircraft, no transponder, no radio contact. The voice of Lieutenant Elias Viper Thorne was cold, professional, the perfect product of military training. But inside his helmet, a single drop of sweat traced a path down his temple. Ahead of him, against the gray skies of Maine, an old DHC-2 Beaver seaplane, a relic from another era, flew with an almost surreal calm, straight into a restricted zone during a live-fire exercise. It was an insect challenging a hurricane. "You have authorization for a warning shot, Viper?" crackled the voice of command in his ear. "If it does not divert, you are cleared to engage." Elias's finger moved to the trigger of the Vulcan cannon. Protocol. Logic. An order is an order. But something felt wrong, a silent alarm. His gut was screaming louder than any command. Pushing in closer, his high-definition display magnified the tail of the aircraft. And there, he saw it. A faded Insignia, almost erased by sun and salt, eaten away by years of weather. A simple design, worn by time. His breath caught in his throat. His finger snapped off the trigger as if it had been burned. The procedures, the training, the orders. They all vanished for an instant, replaced by an icy disbelief that shot up his spine. "Viper, execute the order." "What is the problem?" boomed command, the impatience clear. But Elias couldn't answer. He couldn't fire. Because that symbol was the protagonist of stories that were never supposed to be told, the signature of a ghost. But before we discover what that symbol represented, and why a trained pilot just risked his entire career by defying a direct order, let's take a moment. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're listening from. It's always amazing to see how global our community has become. And while you're at it, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It takes you a second, but for us, it means everything. And now, back to the story. 12 years earlier, that symbol belonged to Kaelen Revenant Ross. Back then, Kaelen wasn't a ghost. She was the storm. Pilots used to say she didn't fly an A-18, she wore it like a second skin. She would dance between enemy radar pings, skim the wavetops with enough precision to scream up the proximity sensors, and hit her targets with the coldness of a surgeon. She was respected, feared, admired. She was the future of the U.S. Navy. Then, everything changed during one silent night over the Black Sea. The intelligence was certain, a weapons trafficking den in a coastal village near Odessa. The order was peremptory, a swift, definitive missile strike. The finishing blow, as always, was assigned to Kaelen. As she lined up for the launch, coordinates locked and weapons systems hot, something in her gut rebelled. A cold doubt. She activated her display's optical zoom, pushing it to its absolute limit. The data on her screen screamed hostile target, but her eyes saw something else. Not military fortifications, but fishing nets hung out to dry. Not armored vehicles, but a single, rusty swing set, creaking gently in the night breeze. The intelligence was a colossal blunder. A tragic, fatal error. "Command, I am aborting the attack." "Repeat, aborting." "Civilian presence confirmed on target," she communicated, her voice firm, but her heart hammering against her ribs. The reply was ice cold, impersonal, the voice of a system, not a man. "Negative, Revenant. The order is executive. Proceed with the mission." In that instant, time froze. On one side, her career, her honor, her future. On the other, the silent lives tied to that rusty swing set. The choice was instantaneous. She pulled back on the stick, banking hard away from the village in a maneuver that screamed insubordination. She had chosen humanity. And she had signed her own condemnation. There was no court-martial, that would have been too loud. There was only silence. A dishonorable discharge, buried under layers of bureaucracy. They took her uniform, her rank, her identity. Her name was scrubbed from active records. And her insignia, the ghost with a broken wing, was retired forever. Kaelen Ross, the legend, had become a ghost. 12 years later, the ghost was living on the coast of Maine. Kaelen ran a seaplane service, flying tourists and supplies. The deafening roar of afterburners had been replaced by the monotonous drone of her old DHC-2 Beaver. But the silence hadn't brought her peace. There were days when, as she repaired the engine, her hands would move with the same millimeter precision she once used to arm a missile. In those moments, if she closed her eyes, the engine's drone would transform in her mind into the thunder of a fighter jet launching from an aircraft carrier, pinning her to the seat. Then she'd open them, and there was only the silence of Maine, the smell of engine oil, and the weight of a broken wing that still remembered perfectly how to fly. It was a nostalgia so profound it took her breath away. She had become an expert at burying the past. Until one day, the past refused to stay buried. On her old tablet, an encrypted email. A few words, but they landed with the weight of lead. Intel error. North Haven Island. Imminent UAV strike. 72 civilians. And then, the sentence that wasn't a request, but a liberation. If you still remember how, now's the time. Kaelen didn't hesitate. The message wasn't asking her to be a soldier again. It was giving her permission to be herself again. She understood immediately, a remote drone strike, likely from the nearby naval base. The same, identical mistake. There was only one way to stop the launch, create an emergency so big, so undeniable, that it would force the base to suspend everything. She took off, heading straight for the live fire exercise area. This wasn't an act of suicide. It was a resurrection. In the skies over Maine, Lieutenant Thorne was caught in a dilemma. Command, I repeat, that insignia. I request a delay on engagement. But the real battle wasn't being fought there. It was being fought hundreds of feet underground, in a windowless command center. There, Admiral Marcus Thorne was overseeing the final seconds before authorizing a Predator drone strike on North Haven Island. Launch in 30 seconds, an operator announced in a monotone voice. It was then that a shrieking alarm, an archaic and terrifying sound, shattered the silence of the command center. Protocol 0. A code that hadn't been heard in decades, reserved only for civilian threats of an unimaginable scale. Admiral Thorne went pale. His blood ran cold. He knew that protocol. And he knew only one person insane and brilliant enough to use it. A young pilot who, 15 years earlier, had used it to save his life and his squad's from an ambush. Her call sign was Revenant. He understood everything in a flash of genius and horror. The intruder in the exercise wasn't a threat. It was a warning. A desperate SOS. Stand down. Abort the drone launch. Abort the North Haven strike, now. Thorne thundered, his voice leaving no room for argument. Confirmation came moments later from an emergency satellite recon. The target was a fishing village. The fighter pilots saw only an intruder in their mock war. But Kaelen was stopping a real one, silent, and lethal. A new order came through Elias Thorne's earpiece, but this time, Command's voice was cracked with emotion. Viper 1, cease all hostile action. Mission scrubbed. Provide honor escort for the civilian aircraft to the base. An honor escort. The two A-18s positioned themselves on the wings of the old seaplane, no longer as jailers, but as guards of honor. When Kaelen landed near the base, Admiral Thorne was there, waiting for her on the pier. Kaelen, he said, his voice hoarse. We made a terrible mistake today. But the bigger mistake was the one we made 12 years ago. We punished conscience when we should have rewarded it. He held out a manila envelope. Inside is the revocation of your discharge. Your rank, your pension, your honor. All of it, restored. Kaelen looked at the envelope, then at the Admiral's weary face. With a small, almost imperceptible shake of her head, she didn't take it. Thank you, Admiral. But I'm not the person who wore that uniform anymore, she said calmly. That person followed orders. The person I am today has learned to follow something else. And that's why I'm here. Her redemption wasn't in that piece of paper. It had already happened, out there, in the gray sky. She climbed back aboard her seaplane and took off, disappearing once more into the fog. Kaelen Ross's story doesn't end in an official report. It ends where true legends do, in the hearts of people. In the base's briefing room, someone hung up an old photo of the seaplane with its faded insignia. And the older pilots began to tell the younger ones the story of Revenant. The story of a pilot who was punished for doing the right thing, but who returned when she was needed most, not to obey an order, but to answer a higher call. This story teaches us something profound. True heroism isn't measured in ranks, medals, or uniforms. It's measured by the choices we make when no one is watching. It's measured by the courage to listen to our own conscience, even when the entire world is telling us not to. Kaelen didn't seek revenge or rehabilitation. She simply proved that sometimes, the greatest victory is the tragedy we manage to prevent. And now, we want to hear your story. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between what was right and what was easy? Or have you ever seen someone pay an unfair price for defending their principles? Tell us about it in the comments. We read and appreciate every single story. If this video touched you and you believe its message is important, please leave a like and share it with anyone who needs a reminder of the value of silent courage. Subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss more incredible stories that make us think and grow together. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. Your support is our greatest motivation. And remember, courage doesn't always wear a uniform, but it always speaks the language of conscience. See you in the next video.